Hello everybody, welcome to NGPC, to your weekly news update for gaming. I'm gonna try to make this one a little bit shorter because I am melting right now. Barcelona is very hot today, and that is why I hate the summer. And if you like the summer, I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know what to tell you. I think you should seek out some help. I know I need some help. I'm melting here. Come on. So let's begin. The first news of this week is that EA had its virtual event, its sort of E3 moment that they hadn't had in June. For some reason they delayed that to July 22nd instead of doing it when everybody else was doing it. And they made a bunch of announcements, but as you know, I just tend to focus on what interests me. I'm not really trying to give you a whole rundown of everything that's happening because that would be kind of impossible, and these videos would have to be almost daily. The highlight for me and for I think a lot of people is the Dead Space remake. This had been rumored for some time, I believe for about, I don't know, a month and a half or so. The original came out in 2008 and it was beloved almost from the get-go, both critically and from people. I count myself among those people. I was a big fan. I remember I played it and I don't know, it's one of those games that you hear about and you're like, is this as good as people are saying it is? And it was even better. Because at that point, I think Resident Evil was kind of starting its decline, or had already started its decline with 5 and 6, which are abysmal. And yeah, this was kind of like a revival for survival, and it was also a sci-fi take on it, which I don't think we had up until that point. Perhaps now it's a little bit more common, but at that point it wasn't. And then the second one was also amazing. I hope that if this is a success, they consider doing that one again as well, because I also love that one very, very much. They're clearly taking a page out of Capcom's book with doing these remakes, having seen the success that Resident Evil is having with both the remake of 2 and 3, which I thought were really masterful. I loved those games. They were definitely on my top 5 for the respective years. Perhaps, I'm not sure about 3, but second one, like 2, 100%. I loved that game so much. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say about this, other than I'm really excited, other than my dog is really making noise just when I'm recording, is the fact that I think it's kind of disappointing. And I thought this before when it wasn't confirmed, and now that it is confirmed, I think it even more, which is, why do these industry insiders have to kind of ruin the announcements? I mean, and in this moment, I'm not really like defending EA, because that's kind of ridiculous, but I don't know, like EA Motive, the people who are developing this, they are the people behind the Star Wars Squadrons, which was also a really cool game, very good looking, by the way. So these people work on this game. They know that there's a lot of excitement from people because we haven't seen a Dead Space title, so they are, I'm imagining, keeping it under wraps just so they can have their moment where they're saying, hey, we're doing this. And in this case, they wouldn't have any audience to go crazy, but they would have Twitter to go crazy. And I mean, of course I'm excited, but since Jeff Grubb, I don't really know who's to blame for this kind of leak, but it wasn't necessary for them to do that. I mean, I'm not sure if they're doing it for clicks, they're doing it for content reasons, they're doing it to maintain their position as insiders. But I do feel for the devs in this moment where they were robbed of that moment. And I'm imagining this as creatives. One of the reasons why you're doing what you're doing is because you love what you're doing, hopefully. And the other reason is because you want to share it with people. You want people to enjoy it. This is perhaps me being a little naive, but that's just what I want to believe the people are doing. Of course, money is a thing. They want to make money. They know there's interest, and that will translate into money for Dead Space, of course. But yeah, I just don't really vibe with this thing of revealing other people's work before they do. I think that's unethical in some ways, even though there are other unethical things that are worse. But I don't know, I just don't like this. But I do like the Dead Space remake is coming. We don't know when. We know it is coming for next gen. I don't believe they're doing for PS4 and Xbox One, which I think is a good thing. They're not doing for Switch, because why the hell would they? Having that be a next gen exclusive is, to me, the best way to go. Of course, PC is probably also gonna be a thing. And yeah, I'll be looking forward to that. So the next news that I saw that was really interesting here was Neill Blomkamp, who is a South African director. He did the movie Chappie, Elysium, and the other one is District 9, which I think is my favorite among those three. He's also, I think, about to release another one called Demonic. He was named Chief Visionary Officer, which I have never heard of that like title before. I believe it may be like a new thing for him. At Gunzilla Games. Gunzilla Games is a recently established studio that is comprised of people that work in Crytek and Ubisoft and EA and other places. And I thought that this was really interesting. He spoke to IGN, I believe it was Joe Screbbles who he spoke with, and he said the following. So, speaking to IGN, Blomkamp explained that his unusual Chief Visionary Officer role will be to act as an egalitarian version of being a film director, working with different parts of the team to decide the best routes forward for design, audio, storytelling, and more. It comes from a place of bringing the directorial skills that would be along the lines of the films that I've done before to the aesthetic of the game, he explains. When asked if it was like a similar role to that of George R.R. Martin on Elden Ring, he kind of replied sort of like, you're thinking in the right way. It seems like he's kind of supervising a lot of departments, because they mentioned design, storytelling, and audio. And in this case, for a filmmaker, you would assume that his main role would be in storytelling, but they're kind of branching him out a little bit into a lot of the stages of production. And I think this is really interesting, because I'm guessing that, and he kind of goes into it in the interview, which I encourage you to read if you're interested. He kind of says game development is not something that he has experience for. He's a gamer, so he kind of loves it from that angle. But he recognizes that the expertise of creating a film is not necessarily translatable to creating a game. And that's totally obvious maybe for gamers, but maybe for industry outsiders instead of insiders, it's not that obvious. But still, the expertise that he does have is something that could complement the game, which in this case is going to be like a AAA multiplayer shooter, which that particularly for me is not really interesting, because as anybody who knows me knows, I'm not a multiplayer guy, but I do think it's very interesting. Like industry-wise, the union of a professional that's seasoned, let's say, filmmaker, which is Neill Blomkamp, coming into games as a dev. Like, he's literally Chief Visionary Officer, CVO from now on, of Gunzilla Games. He's an employee, he works there. It doesn't seem to be like only a consulting thing where he's an external person. He seems to be part of the team. So I find that really interesting. I think that, of course, the gaming industry could benefit from having sort of an outsider's perspective that knows about audiovisual crafts and storytelling and all this. Like anything that could complement a game or could enrich it in any way, I think it's positive. In this case, like, he's a very talented filmmaker. If my memory serves correctly, I believe he was working on a Halo movie with Peter Jackson, and then that kind of crashed and burned, and then what remained from that is what then turned into District 9. And I've heard you could kind of see that if you see the weapons that they use in District 9, they're sort of very similar to the Halo weapons. And yeah, that is very interesting. He's also doing, I believe, District 10 now as well, which is going to be a whole nother thing, and I'm looking forward to that as well. But yeah, I believe this is very interesting. This could mean, like, we've seen before how filmmakers go into games, and it doesn't really always go that well. I believe James Cameron tried to do an Avatar game with his first Avatar movie, and that, I believe, had horrible reviews. I also remember Christopher Nolan wanted to use games as a way to expand the Inception universe, and I thought that was really exciting at the time, but that was like a decade ago almost, or maybe even more. And that never came to fruition, unfortunately. Although, I'm not sure how that wouldn't even worked. So yeah, she does. She makes noise again because she doesn't care. She doesn't give a fuck. Doesn't matter. Of course, we also have Guillermo del Toro's. He was making a game. I don't remember the name of the game, but it also got canceled. And then of course he teamed up with Kojima and tried to do Silent Hills, and that also crashed and burned because Kojima was fired. And yeah, so it's kind of like a curse where when filmmakers get involved, it always kind of doesn't go as well. I believe maybe, this is just me speculating, right? But maybe that is because, as Neill says, they tried to bring their expertise and try to translate it directly into what a game could be, and that doesn't really work. Like, you have to think of gaming as an interactive experience where you're not really leading like you are a spectator from a movie down the path of your story. They have to feel like they have some sort of agency of what's going on, what's happening. And yeah, like that's a whole different ballgame. So yeah, I hope this is perhaps the beginning, because I can't really think of other examples of this working correctly. I don't think I'll be checking this out because it's a multiplayer shooter, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it turns out to be an amazing experience and I eat my words later. So stay tuned on that. And then the last thing I wanted to discuss on this week's update is something that's not very positive, and we kind of went into this in the podcast this week because the podcast this week is titled "What the Fuck Happened to Ubisoft?" And of course I'm talking about Tom Clancy's XDefiant, the emoji-riddled title for the new multiplayer free-to-play game where they mishmash all the Tom Clancy games lore and factions and everything. Like, they have the Echelon from the Splinter Cell series in there, and then there's also some from the Division, which I don't really remember the name. And I believe that what the game is doesn't really worry me, because it's just, I don't know, like a Overwatch cross Warzone clone that I'm also not interested in. And just because I'm not interested in doesn't mean I'm gonna shit on it. The reason why I'm not liking this direction is because it shows once again Ubisoft going the route of this live service game and less in the route of going and building single player experiences that are meaningful, like they used to do with Splinter Cell back in the day, with Assassin's Creed back in the day. Because I do believe that the Assassin's Creed games, they are now considered like bloated RPGs where you can spend 80 hours doing a bunch of side quests and stuff like that, and the story has not been really interesting for maybe almost a decade now. And as I said, you can listen to the podcast if you want to hear me and Christian discussing this. I think it was a really worthwhile conversation, because we not only said what's frustrating us from the perspective of fans, because ultimately we're fans of these games that they're kind of leaving to the wayside and turning into live service whatevers. And also Christian, because I'm not going to take the credit, offers a solution, which I'm sure Ubisoft will not take. Perhaps they won't ever listen to it, but it is there for you to hear if you want. That's going to be coming out next week, I believe, that episode, because that's how the pipeline works. So yeah, the other thing about this that I find really almost insulting is the Tom Clancy name attached to it. Because, okay, you could justify it by saying that, of course, the factions of the Tom Clancy games, which weren't written by Tom Clancy either, but the Tom Clancy name is tied to a certain type of franchises. Like, it's more grounded experiences. It tends to be like a military conspiracy kind of thing, or, you know, like a spy thing with Splinter Cell or Ghost Recon, where it's like you have a team. Even though there are different kinds of games, the name Tom Clancy kind of takes your mind towards the fact that the story is going to be something like you kind of know what you're expecting. Here, the first thing you see in the trailer is the Tom Clancy logo, which is this little soldier being put up with a mohawk on, and that already tells you everything you need to know about this game. Like, this is them like stamping the sticker of Tom Clancy on whatever project that they were doing here, and XDefiant and calling it a Tom Clancy thing. It's not a Tom Clancy thing. It doesn't have anything to do with Tom Clancy. I mean, they're just doing this because they know or they think that it's gonna attract more people just because it has a Tom Clancy name. But no, like it doesn't make any sort of sense. But yeah, as I said, I don't really want to be that negative. But I don't really like this at all. I don't really like the direction that Ubisoft in general is going towards. They already had said that they were gonna shift into a more live service game kind of thing. We already saw Assassin's Creed Infinity. Well, we don't see the game, but we know that it's coming and that it's not gonna be single player focused perhaps, but it's gonna be like, yeah, a live service thing. And that to me is the death of Assassin's Creed, and the second death, because I believe that there's a first death that was also pretty sad when after 3. But yeah, like after that podcast episode where Christian and I described how we feel about Ubisoft games now, there isn't anything pulling me to Ubisoft games now, with the exception of Mario plus Rabbids, because I do believe that that's kind of unique in its own sort of way, and much better than it has any right being. But other than that, like Far Cry experiences are never, like, the story never goes anywhere interesting. The game is always a collectathon, which is fun. I like those games. But are they gonna give me new experiences? Are they gonna make me, I don't know, realize something new? Am I gonna remember any narrative moments years later? I don't really think so. I haven't had that happen with Far Cry for years, since 3. I haven't had that happen with Assassin's Creed since 3 as well. It seems like 3 is their limit. And I haven't had that happen with Splinter Cell anymore, because they are and no more Splinter Cell games. So yeah, it's a little bit sad, but it is the reality. So that is going to be everything for this week's update. It's going to be a shorter one, although I do see that I have been recording for 20 minutes, and I don't really see how that's possible. I'm already, I don't know if you can see it, I'm kind of melting because I have to close everything here so that noise doesn't come in. And I will see you in the next update, in the next video. Bye.